Teens are losing their religion, and the church shares the blame.
Teenagers are thirsty for religious and spiritual expression that to them is relevant and makes sense.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
And I, too, would like to welcome you to today's program. Looking forward to this discussion. We're glad that you've tuned in. Before we get started, I would like for the participants of our panel today to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. Let's start with the gentleman to my right.
Hi, I'm Carl TROVALL. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, which is affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
I'm Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident of the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God, and I serve at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, as Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations.
I'm Andrea Luxon. I'm President of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm Dan Levin. I'm the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel of Boca Raton, Florida.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here today. So glad you could take time from your schedules to join us for this discussion. It's an interesting one, religion and teens. It appears that being religious is no longer a trend for teens, and that's according to the Barna Group. They say that Generation Z, people born between 1999 and 2015, associate themselves with atheism twice as much as the general population. Research indicates that the decline among teens is at 29% among 8th graders, 25% among high school sophomores, and 27% among high school seniors. That was in 2010, indicating an average of a 12% decrease from the year 2000. It is also significant to note that 13% of teens identify as atheist, which is double the population of adults who consider themselves atheists. According to the Barna Group, some say that the drop of religion in teens is the idea of evil and suffering and how it could exist if there is God who does no evil. Barna also claims that political issues like LGBTQ rights, poverty, and immigration policy may also explain the decrease in religion in teens. Still others attribute the decline of religion among teens to being so immersed in social media and entertainment. Sokolska Bokniak, a catechism teacher in Los Angeles, for example, commenting on this disturbing trend, says this, quote, "Today, society tends to imply that life is all about the material world and is what you own that defines your worth," close quote. Bokniak also observes that so few people spend time with their family together to talk, to pray, discuss, or even read small parts of the Bible together. Well, if there is a silver lining to all of this, it's found in a recent study from UCLA that indicates that while religion in teens as a whole has declined, teens who are religious maintain their religious identity even if they do not participate in religious activities. I'd like our panelists to consider these three questions at least. First of all, what can faith communities learn from these studies about what they might do to reverse the trend of the decline of religion in teens? Another question, what role, if any, does public school education play in the decline? And then finally, the third question, what is your church or synagogue doing to attract and retain young people. Well, that is our subject for today. You've already been introduced to the panelists. We'd like to go back to the ones who helped to open the program, and that is back to Dr. Luxton and then over to Rabbi Levin. So, Dr. Luxton, you started with the opening remark. Tell us more about your thoughts on the subject of religion in teens.
It's very difficult. We have had several suggestions here as to why there is a fall of interest in religion by teens. I think probably all of those have a part to play. Maybe just in broad terms, America is becoming a more secularized society with all that means. And maybe we are following the direction of, say, Europe, where there are even less teens that are involved in church. So is it an inevitable move and shift? I don't know that it has to be inevitable, but certainly there are significant challenges. So I said the church shares the blame. I suppose my question here is this, is as religious communities, are we open enough? Are we willing to not put our traditions aside, but at least allow them to be questioned by our teens and by the young people in our churches? Are we able to kind of take their scrutiny and actually encourage them to participate, even sometimes when the way they participate may not be the way that make us feel terribly comfortable? Because I think the one fact is true is that if they don't feel they have a part to play, then they won't be there. I mean, that's they just don't want to be participants, particularly participants in something that maybe they don't totally understand or agree with. So the question, what are we doing? I think to some degree that's rhetorical. We need to ask ourselves, what are we doing to enable that group to feel they have a voice, they can participate, they can help us make it relevant. It's easy for us to find solutions for them, but maybe they need to be involved in helping find solutions. I know our church, Seventh-day Adventist Church, in fact, right now, in about a week from now, we're going to have about 9,000 teenagers all coming together up in Wisconsin, a place called Oshkosh, for a Pathfinder camporee. And that is something that young people come from all over the world and participate, and it's a very participatory. And usually from that, they go along feeling a significantly increased sense of identity with being part of an organization, a religious organization. So just a few thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. Rabbi Levin, you took a more positive view. You're saying that teenagers are really hungering and thirsting for religion or spirituality. Tell us more about that, please.
So I think what happens is that young people, when they're little, they'll go to their parents and they'll say, well, tell me about God. And parents usually feel okay giving a 5-year-old answer to that question. God is kind of like a parent, and just like mom and dad loves you, so God loves you too. And just like your parents want you to learn what's right and wrong, God also wants you to learn what's right and wrong. Then the kid gets a little bit older and will ask a 10-year-old question instead of a 5-year-old question. And what happens is we get into a period of children's development when they are only able to comprehend concrete ideas, when religion and theology are abstract notions, and you end up with a conflict there. So the only option that kids that don't really understand the abstract thing have, when they don't believe necessarily in the concrete things they were taught when they were little, is, oh, then I must be an atheist. And if parents are not equipped to give their children, or religious educators aren't able to give their children a more age-appropriate, sophisticated understanding, well, then they find many, many opportunities in the secular culture to opt out. But what I find in working with teenagers, and I've been working with teenagers for more than 25 years, is that they really are hungry and thirsty for answers that are meaningful and are relevant, and that speak to them in the way that they experience their life. So when a child will come to me and they'll say, well, Rabbi, I don't believe in God. What they expect to hear is, well, you have to. And what I say instead of them is I say, good, so tell me about the God you don't believe in. And when they start explaining the God that they don't believe in, it's the God they were taught when they were 5 years old. And I say, well, that's good, congratulations, I don't believe in that God either. Yeah. But let's talk about a God you can believe in. Yeah. Let's talk about moral teachings that make sense to you. And I think that what happens to teens sometimes is that they find that traditional ritual expression doesn't jive with the way that they would want to express their spirituality, but that the questions that teenagers are asking are the fundamental religious questions that people have been asking since time immemorial. Who am I? How do I know if I'm good? What kind of relationships am I supposed to have with other people? How do I use my life, my body for good and holy means? And I think helping teens answer those questions can be among the most empowering things that you can do religiously for anyone.
And thank you. The Barna Group study seemed to indicate what you're saying in the real terms of describing teens who are concerned about, if there is God, why so much pain and suffering in the world, to try to make sense of that. And of course, that's basing on whether or not they believe in a good and gracious God and who has taught them. But what do you think about that, Carl, what you've heard so far?
Well, as I was looking at the study, I mean, one of the number one questions is the theodicy. That is, why is there God all good, all powerful? Why is there suffering in the world? Well, that is a very difficult question. No, there's absolutely no question about it. But that is also a question that theologians and philosophers have dealt with since time began. So it's to give teens shallow answers to profound questions is, I think, perhaps part of the problem. And that, I mean, I really appreciated, Dan, what you had to say about the 5-year-old conception of God being given as the answer for a more complicated question of someone who's grown up. And I think that that's precisely it, that if we seriously engage people and let them ask the questions that they have, the teens. I looked at, by the way, the second one, hypocrisy of Christians. Well, or of religious people. Yeah, I know, that's a problem. It's always been a problem. In fact, I don't even know how to deal with hypocrisy in myself. So let's talk about hypocrisy. The third is the science refutes the Bible. So they're getting two messages, one from Bible, one from science, and they're trying to struggle it out. Guess what? We're all trying to struggle and piece that one out. So we need to invite them into the struggle, not to give them answers.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Dr. Robeck, welcome.
Thank you. I want to pick up, in a sense, where Carl left off with the question of what kind of role does the secular school system play in all of this. And I don't want to come down on secular schools. That's where I sent all my kids. You know, I chose not to go to Christian schools because I felt like they live in a real world and they need to be introduced to that real world fairly quickly. I also live halfway between the Caltech and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which are both really strong scientific communities. And I take science very seriously. But I have to say that an awful lot of the science that I was taught in secular schools and in university was wrong. Everything keeps changing. I mean, even if I go to the medical doctor, you know, he'll say, well, you know, we used to believe this, but now we believe this, okay? So science isn't the answer to everything. I think part of the problem lies with us in the church in that we often, at least in my tradition, often separate the church on the one hand and God's here and science is over here as though it were an enemy. And my sense is God created us with minds that have taken us where we have gone, and I think that's all part of what God intended. So what I think is that in the secular school setting, in the United States, where we have worked very hard on the judicial and legislative sides to separate out any aspect of faith, faith is no longer taken as seriously in the classroom as it ought to be. Because I think without faith, science can be utterly devastating. On the other hand, without science, faith doesn't always make sense. And it comes up with these easy answers instead of the more difficult kinds of abstract ideas that people really need to hear if they're going to hear the fullness of the gospel.
All right, thank you very much. Bishop Olson, your thoughts, please.
It's an excellent conversation. I was struck initially by Rabbi's point of, you know, the asking of questions. And one of the things that I find that's somewhat new, perhaps at least new to me, is that sometimes we're encountering teens that don't bother to ask the questions. You know, and I as we talk about asking questions, it presupposes, first of all, belonging to someone to ask a question of that can give you even a facile answer. And I think there's a longing for belonging that that just if we take religion as a set of concepts won't answer without, in a sense, belonging to a family, belonging to a congregation, an assembly. And so I think on our part as religious people, we have to find how do we help them to belong, because and how do we belong with them first, perhaps, is the real question. What do we have in common? And with that, I think also then comes perhaps a healing between the chasm that exists in many places between spirituality and religion in contemporary society, or at least of what's added. Because I think, we hear the answer, or at least the claim, and it's sort of a religious claim made by particularly this generation, though not exclusively, that I'm spiritual but I'm not religious. Well, that seems to be a code of a religion,
All right, thank you very much. Let's come over to Canon Peterson. Glad to have you here today, too. Your thoughts, please.
Well, first off, I want to thank Barna and the Barna Group for this study. I think it's very important, and it raises some very important questions. I think one of the interesting things that comes out of it is that they actually talk about atheists and not agnostics. I mean, it'd be a far different question if it was an agnostic situation, and I suspect that, Dan, you would be seeing this in a different way as well. But to have it as an atheist, no belief, that's really a phenomenon. I remember 10 years ago on this program, the American Religious Town Hall, we were dealing with the same questions, but that question at that point was with the mainline churches. And why are the teens dropping out of the mainline churches? And the solution or the answers were, well, because the more conservative churches were, of course, giving that the students wanted to have more conservative answers, and therefore people were leaving the mainline churches for a more conservative level. Well, now all of a sudden Barna, which is a conservative evangelical policy group, shows that isn't working even within the evangelical church tradition, but that you are having a major change that's taking place here. I think this is really important because it seems to me that it's forcing us as a church now, united in some respects over this issue, to start dealing with these issues in relationship to how does a church, how does a synagogue, how does the mosque respond when you see such a huge drop in young people going to church, teenagers going to church. And so it's not simply a conservative or a mainline problem anymore. It's a church problem that we all face, and how do we respond? And what's absolutely fascinating is, as the moderator pointed out in his statement, Barna also claims that political issues like LGBTQ rights, poverty and immigration policies may also explain the decrease, that the answers that are being given today simply are not adequate for that 5-year-old child.
And so the answers are coming from adults, clearly, for the most part, because young people look to adults, our children as well as our students. And so I'm hearing that this is an adult problem, not necessarily a teen problem. Is that what I'm hearing? I don't know to put a finer point on it, but Dr. Luxton, what do you think?
I don't know.
Are we just not adequately explaining things or leading?
Well, I think it's very hard. I think we always will answer and respond from our own reference points. And our own reference points are going to inevitably be different every generation. There were some questions, as we look at some of these questions, that have been consistently there through time. But the way it's being heard may be different by generation. I want to get back to what Bishop Olson said about belonging, because I think this is huge. Because if you look at other studies for this age group, you're seeing a significant increase in a sense of lack of belonging and loneliness, significant increase in anxiety and depression. Okay, so there is this absolute desire to be part of something, even while maybe some of the lifestyles tend to push them away from belonging. And so I think, coming back to what we can do, it seems that we have to really create a strong sense of belonging. But I would warn, not our sense of what belonging means, but we need them to help us define what does it mean to belong in this environment and to help them frame the answers for us.
Thank you. We have a few seconds left, and Rabbi Levin, you had indicated you wanted to speak again.
So I would say a couple of quick things. First is, I think you can't divorce teens from the system and the family structures in which they're growing. So if you have other adults in that family that discount the importance of religion, it's going to be a lot harder for a young person to embrace it. So in my congregation, sometimes I'll have a young person at 13 who wants to continue their Jewish education. The parents say, no, we're all done. So we need to have family structures, community structures that encourage young people to continue to use their religious heritage as a portal to explore their spiritual questions. And the second thing, I think, is to explain to teens what it is that they're doing in their religious institution. That if they want to study scientific truths or they want to study academic facts, that's what they go to school for. But the one thing that they won't teach them at school is wisdom. The one thing they won't teach them is what to do with that knowledge, how to apply that knowledge. And I find that when I work with teens and tell them what the synagogue or their religious institution has to offer, they find that they find a much greater home there.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you for getting that in. There is an important announcement I'd like for you to hear. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome back. So glad that you stood by for this part of the program. We're coming to the summation part, but before we go there, I would also like to encourage you to go to the website. There's some really important, interesting things there for you to see, not the least of which are some archive programs from past programs that we've had here at the Town Hall. We're going to go to our summations just now, and for that, we're going to begin with Dr. TROVALL. You're first.
Thank you. I teach at Concordia, and I teach students in this age group, and I teach theology and philosophy. And my experience has always been that when you treat students with respect and take their questions seriously and then begin to engage, I always find there to be a deep and rich conversation, which I always walk away learning more than I started with, which brings me to what a number of you mentioned, the importance of community. I mean, we need a place to say and think, be respected, and a place to hopefully unite and do things that are also change the world.
Thank you. Bishop Olson, your summary.
I think a sense of belonging is fundamental to both religious experience and the articulation of a religious experience. A sense of belonging to a family, a sense of belonging to a community that can help to clarify the authentic and the true from that which is passing away.
Thank you. And Dr. Luxton, please.
I think when you look at all the reasons given for teens leaving, yeah, they may be a reason, but I think that comes as a way that a teen can explain, well, I'm leaving because I don't like this or this. But I think relationship overcomes a whole lot of that. It gives a frame for conversation, and that is beyond the church. It comes down to the individual. So I think the challenge to anyone in a faith community is what am I doing to build meaningful relationships, caring relationships with this age group that are vulnerable. And I think that will help a lot.
Thank you. Rabbi Levin, your summation.
I think that there is a lot of wisdom in the discussion of third place, that each of us needs three places where we matter. First is home, Second is where we spend our days, whether it's work or school. And then we need that third place. And I think religious institutions can offer that place where, as you say, Bishop, there is belonging, where there's connection, where I'm important, where I am safe to ask all the questions that matter to me, and I know that I will receive a loving and an interested and respectful response. And the more that we can show as families and communities support for teens on those journeys, the better the investment we'll realize from that.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Robeck.
Yes, I've been helped by this whole conversation. In particular, Dan, thank you for your interventions. I do think there are a couple of things. One is we talk about the secular setting, we can talk about the family, and we can talk about the church. And I think that they're answering different kinds of questions. As you noted, there's a sense in which we're getting facts from schools and science, and we're getting wisdom, in a sense, from the religious community. I would also say that parents need to take very seriously the role that they play in the religious development of their children. I find we have 5 teenage grandchildren right now, and every one of them is very much interested in spirituality, in their growth. They're making commitments one after another, and it's been really rich to watch that. But it's also the case that they need to know that the parents are committed to that, and as a result, they're quite willing to play a part in that formation.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Canon Peterson.
Yes, in the newsletter of Religion and Ethics, 2 arguments were made why this is happening, the decline. One is simply alienation and the endless pursuit of different political agendas that simply do not match the agenda of the young people themselves today. And particularly, it's in different wars that they are facing in relationship to LGBT rights. That's a given. What's interesting is that the conservative youth who are leaving the church are not going to the mainline churches. They just simply drop out, agnostic. And so another analysis of it is that it's complicated. And how come this whole situation is arising like it is very complicated, and it's going to have to be worked out. Yes, indeed, and I agree fully with those people around the table who are saying the identity and how they become part of a group that understands. And are we in the church, the synagogue, mosque, really willing to understand?
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
That's perhaps one of the best summaries we've heard. All the others are great too, but it is complicated, as this discussion has indicated today. And I'm sure you would have comments to make if you were able to, and you can. Just drop us a line, write us a letter. Tell us what you think about today's program, and make suggestions as to what you would like to see discussed and hear discussed at the next Religious Town Hall meeting. For now, though, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.